Well, good evening and welcome to the University of Texas at Austin. My name is Greg Fenves. I'm the Executive Vice President Provost here. And on behalf of our great university and especially the McCombs School of Business and the Robert S. Strauss Center, it is wonderful to see you all on campus, even on this rainy evening in Austin. The University of Texas is a university of the first class. And one of our features and one of my passions is our commitment to innovation and entrepreneurship. This runs through our city. Austin, as you all know, is a hotbed of innovation and high-tech development. And it has been for more than 30 years, and it continues to grow along with our university. As just the latest example, just down the street, the Dell Medical School at the University of Texas is leading innovations in medicine as it works within the university and the Austin community and nationally to dramatically improve the health of Austin and improve clinical practice and healthcare delivery through innovation. All of which makes our campus the perfect setting for tonight's inaugural event in an exciting initiative by the Aspen Institute. The Aspen Institute has earned a global reputation for sparking thoughtful debate and discussion on the most important issues facing us today. And it is in that spirit the Institute is launching Aspen Across America, beginning right here with the one and only Walter Isaacson and the world-famous Michael Dell. To tell you more, I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Eric Motley, the Vice President of the Aspen Institute and the Executive Director of Aspen Across America.
Thank you.
Eric.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Provost. I'll get it right. Thank you, Mr. Provost. Thank you on behalf of the Aspen Institute to the whole of University of Texas, to the Strauss Center, to the McCombs School of Business. We're very, very excited to be here. And none of this could have really happened without a number of individuals who are great friends of ours here in Austin that I feel compelled to acknowledge. One is Dr. Alex Dell, who is a great supporter of the Aspen Institute, and the name might suggest that there is some relation. Clay Johnson, who chaired a very important commission at the Aspen Institute that was focused on reforming the federal appointments process, and Professor Robert Chesney, who has been kind of my partner in helping to create this evening and has brought all of these many parts together to make this what I know will be a very successful inaugural event for the Aspen Institute. And when the idea was inspired, I phoned one individual by the name of Jim Langdon, who's at Aiken Gump and who's very much connected to the University of Texas here at Austin. And Jim is a can-do person and said, this will happen. There are two individuals you need to speak to. And by the end of the day, I was speaking to Robert and someone else. And so Jim and Sandy, we're very grateful for your support for this evening. The Aspen Institute was founded a little over 60 years ago with the intent of bringing people together to re-examine the timeless values and principles that inform our way of thinking about the critical issues that we face in society today. And 63 years later, we're still known for our power of convening thought leaders, politicians, academicians, and citizens to look at finding viable solutions to those complex problems. About 8 months ago, we started to conceive of this idea called Aspen Across America. And we thought, we're doing a really great job of convening people. Why not take this on the road across America? And so I'm very proud to say that this is our inaugural stop. This is our first stop on this Great American Road Tour. The Winnebago is outside. I was in Dallas a couple of nights ago and someone asked me, why Austin? And you know, I thought, wow, you know, Dallas people. And there were 4 reasons that I came up with. One, this was on my feet, very quick, off the cuff. Well, we wanted to begin at the beginning of the alphabet. And Alaska was a little too remote. So Austin. We wanted a great partner at an institution that was committed to scholarship and serious research. And we wanted one of the most exciting cities in America to be our first stop, a city that reflected creativity and innovation and the spirit of human potential. And then we decided we wanted to showcase a rather extraordinary individual to be in dialogue with our own CEO, Walter Isaacson. And it just so happens that Michael Dell lives here in Austin. At the age of 19, when he was a student here at the University of Texas here at Austin, he became somewhat distracted with the great captivating idea. And at the age of 19, with $1,000 probably given to him by his father, Dr. Dell, he pursued that idea. And that idea became one of the most transformative engines of innovation, Dell Computers. Michael Dell needs no introduction, nor does Walter Isaacson, the CEO of the Aspen Institute, who I think is one of the great public intellectuals of our generation, and certainly one of the great biographers. And the conversation tonight is very appropriate for Austin, for all of you, and for these two individuals who will engage us in a very thought-provoking discussion on entrepreneurship, creativity, and innovation and the future of technology. Walter and Michael, we're very happy to have you in this series, this inaugural series. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. I'll tell you the real reason we're in Austin. There is no city that connects the arts and technology better, that connects creativity to entrepreneurship better. I love Austin and have a particular affection for it because after the hurricane, my parents moved here for 6 months because my brother had gone to the University of Texas, and you took in a lot of people after the storm. I also have a deep affection for Alex Dell and Susan. Thank you for being here. And I wanted to start, because I'm an aspiring biographer, I wanted to start, and you may be the subject, if I do the next volume. I wanted to start even before you were 19. You were an investor here in Austin when you were in school, right?
I was here as a biology major, freshman biology major,
But I'm talking about even in high school and before. Didn't you sort of start businesses, sell Houston Post?
Oh, that was back in Houston.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I was doing all kinds of businesses from a pretty young age.
And what got you interested in computers?
I was in in my junior high school, in the math class, we had this kind of advanced math class, they called it, and I was lucky enough that my junior high school, is part of the Houston Independent School District, the public school system, got a teletype terminal. And on this teletype terminal, we could type in programs, and the answer would come back. And I was just unbelievably fascinated by this. So I would, stay after school and type in these programs. And then I started learning about the microprocessor. There was this thing called Byte Magazine,
Right.
and
Intel had just come out with the 8088.
Intel had come out with the 8088. There was a Radio Shack store in between my school and my house. So when I
Don't tell me you started with a trash 80.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
But you could, it was on the riding my bike back and forth, right? So got really enthralled with that when I was about 14 or 15. Saved up enough money and bought an Apple II. And the great thing about personal computers at that time is you could take them apart, and all the parts were made by other companies, and you could understand exactly how the whole thing worked.
So you had a soldering iron and used to jack into things like?
Oh yeah, we were hacking away and kind of figuring out how the thing worked and how to upgrade it. And
do you think we lose something now? The Apple II was, Wozniak famously insisted you be able to open it up, jack in. Of course, the next series, Macintosh and all, were sealed appliances. Do you think kids lose something now that they don't know what a circuit board looks like?
I think kids that want to know that, it's pretty easy to know. I mean, there are all sorts of Arduino and all sorts of ways for kids who want to get into that to build their own computers and learn about integrated circuits. They are much more of a black box today, right? Where you've integrated enormous numbers of transistors into a very, very small number of chips. But yeah, that's kind of how I got started.
And then you came to the University of Texas. You were saying you did biology at first?
I was a biology major, and I was, kind of had this thing on the side where I was upgrading computers and actually go back a little bit. In 1981, IBM introduced the personal computer, and I was 16 years old, and it occurred to me that that was a big deal, right? And that, with an affordable personal computer that people could use in business, that this was going to be a very exciting thing. Small businesses could buy them, any business could afford them, and that just kind of it really interested me. Mm-hmm. So I kind of had this side activity while I was supposed to be going to school of upgrading these machines, and it got in the way of my studies a bit.
That's why you went to University of Texas? Sorry.
No. Although I will say, when you go to a really large university, one of the advantages is if you don't show up for class, nobody really knows, right? So,
big advantage, yeah.
So yeah, there might have been a time or two I didn't quite show up, but anyway. Around November, actually Thanksgiving of 1983, my parents had sort of gotten the sense that I was really focusing more on this computer business stuff than going to school. And so they came up, somewhat of a surprise visit, gave me a very stern lecture. You got to get your priorities straight, all that kind of stuff we tell our kids. And
is that true?
This is all very, very true. We got another eyewitness here, and I committed to my parents that I was going to stop doing that and focus on my studies, and that lasted for about 10 days. I really, really tried hard, but what's interesting is during that 10 days, that's actually when I decided it wasn't a hobby or a fun thing. It was actually something I was very passionate about and wanted to do much, much more. So if they hadn't made me stop, I might never have created the company.
Mm-hmm. And so when did you dropped out to do the company?
Well, I finished my freshman year. I incorporated the company about a week before finals. Which not the best idea, but that's what happened. Stuff happens. So I kind of relocated the business from my dorm room into a little bit more proper office. And, the business grew. In the first 9 months, it was $6 million, and the next year was $33 million. It grew about 80% per year, compounded for 8 years. Wow. And then for the 6 years after that, it grew compounded 60%. And if you're pretty good at math, you're into tens of billions of dollars at that point.
And it was because of a real disruptive technology and idea that you could sell. I mean, this is where the internet meets the personal computer.
Yeah, it was certainly the time of the enormous growth in the personal computer. But what I observed was that the way the machines were being sold was rather inefficient. Mm-hmm. It took way too long for the technology to get to the user, and the cost was quite high. And so, when we introduced our 286-based machine, it was twice the performance of IBM's, and it was half the price. And so we didn't have any problem selling a lot of them.
Right.
The business grew very quickly.
So it was not just a new marketing chain, meaning direct to consumers. It was also building better products.
It was more direct to customer.
Yeah.
Because actually most of our customers were businesses, and we certainly sold to consumers too. But it was a new business model, and also a new way to engage with customers.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to do a little quiz here about people I've written about. What do you have in common with Benjamin Franklin, Albert Einstein, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates? I could go on. all of you drop out of college. This is why I never get asked to give graduation speeches. But was being rebellious and willing to take that big leap an important, part of what made you who you are?
It actually didn't seem like a big risk because...
Did it seem like a big risk to you? Yeah, okay.
Because, the University of Texas, if you leave for a semester, you can come right back.
Yeah.
And so we kind of came to an understanding, my parents and I, that I would sort of take the business into a different phase. And if it worked, I'd keep doing it. And so far, so good. So, and if it didn't, I'd
So you may have to go back to the University of Texas at some point.
Yeah.
Study biology and
Yeah.
right. Well, as you know, Susan and Michael did the med school that will open in 2016. So there's a spot for you there, I guess, if you need it. No.
My parents always wanted me to go to medical school.
Are they still disappointed you didn't become a doctor?
Yeah, I think a little bit. Yeah.
So you become, at age 27, if I'm right, the youngest CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Tell me what that was like, sort of being a whole generation different from the people you were competing against.
It was fun. The good news is that I wasn't the first young person in the technology sector.
Right,
and there were others that I could look to, right, that had done, things like that. We were just focused on growing our business, and the kind of all-consuming, all-occupying activity were the opportunities in front of us, which were enormous and actually continue to be enormous as we think about expanding into, new services, software, helping our customers actually solve big problems, not just the supplying the technology itself, expanding around the world, tons of opportunity.
And you took it privately when? How was it?
We completed the privatization end of October of last year.
Oh, wow.
The company was public for 25 years.
And how liberating has that been?
It's been great. It really has allowed us to think about the business in a different way, think about it more in a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year horizon, to take on some risks that are harder to take on in a public company. It's allowed us to go after some investments that we've wanted to go after, and we've been able to accelerate our growth rate. We're gaining share. All of our businesses are doing well. Lots of progress. And the interesting thing, if you think about public companies today, their shareholders have a pretty big voice. That's not altogether bad. It's just that all the shareholders don't agree. You got some.
And is there a particular problem with activist shareholders who think they can run your business better than you can?
Not for me anymore.
Yeah,
I'm all done with those guys.
Yeah,
But certainly for some other companies, that's a real issue. I think, look, anything taken to an extreme can be a problem. And I think, if you think about activism investing as a strategy to show up at a company, buy a small percentage, agitate for some particular thing during a given period of time, the thing occurs, they leave, they go to the next one. Does the accumulation of a series of short-term oriented activities result in the best long-term outcome? I don't think so. In fact, I think...
Give me an example.
Well, I think, I think in this country we have examples in education. I think we have it in politics. I think we have it in business.
But I meant from Dell when it was public. What type of things can you do now where you couldn't do it when you had to have a more short-term instead of long-term perspective?
Sure. So we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars in projects that will lower our earnings in the current period or periods, but we believe are great businesses, a year, 2, 3 years from now. And so we've added, thousands of salespeople. We've, invested in cloud and analytics and, building out new software businesses, new services businesses. Healthcare IT is a rapidly growing sector. We've got a great business there. We're kind of doubling down on that business. Cybersecurity, we've got some fantastic businesses. And if you think about what public companies deal with, it's this kind of pressure from short-term shareholders. Give us a bigger dividend, buy back the stock, merge with this, spin this out. Sometimes it might actually be right, but when you get a kind of perfect alignment of the customer, the strategy, what the company wants to do, just makes it a whole lot easier.
But you've talked about a 90-day shot clock, meaning you really do have to keep that short-term focus when you have a publicly traded company. Explain what that is, that concept.
Yeah, so public companies, have this reporting period. Every 90 days, they report their revenues or earnings, a bunch of other things. And there's this thing called guidance, right? And the guidance, interestingly enough, it would imply that it's something that the company has offered about its future prospects. It's not always the case. Sometimes companies don't say anything, and the guidance is given to them. As if the outside world knows what the company should do. Maybe it does, but sometimes it doesn't. So the problem with that, of course, is that the managers in the company become very fixated on achieving this short-term oriented, right? So let's say you're running a business and there's an opportunity that requires investment. It requires investment now, but the results or the rewards don't come for another year or two. Well, if you're so focused on achieving that guidance, you may never even hear about the opportunity, much less have a decision to decide.
But then how does somebody like Jeff Bezos hold that at bay? I mean, can you do it running a public company?
Well, it's a good question. I think, for most of their history, he's shown an ability to do that. Now, he did something very unique at the beginning when he went public. He published this famous letter, 1997, where he explained exactly what he was going to do. Now, some would argue that it's fraying around the edges and some of the shareholders aren't happy, whatever. That's sort of
stock price is not doing as well, but yeah.
That's something he'll have to deal with. And there probably are other potential solutions, like in some companies, the founder or founders have extraordinary levels of control over the voting of the shares that provides some measure of that, right?
Yeah. You mentioned a few moments ago, you ticked off the things you're able to get into as being entrepreneurial and innovative because you're private. Let's go through some of them and tell us about how, where you think they're going. I think the one you mentioned was medical analytics.
Yeah, so, the healthcare IT sector is very interesting. If you look at the economy, healthcare is consuming a larger and larger portion of the economy, yet IT has not played the transformative role in healthcare that it has in other sectors. And we're working with hundreds of thousands of doctors, thousands of hospitals to build health information systems, evidence-based medicine systems, affiliated physician systems, medical imaging systems, to be able to use data to be able to improve patient outcomes.
Then why is it so hard for people like me to get electronic medical records out of my doctor's office?
Probably a better question for your doctor, but there are all sorts of barriers and reasons why it's been more difficult. It's starting to happen more and more, and there are starting to be more and more standards and interoperability. There are certainly privacy issues and concerns. Even some of the doctors don't want to adopt the systems because they allow for a very broad analysis of activities and outcomes, which may not be to the liking of the doctors.
Getting back to the medical analytics you're doing, how would that be translated, say, into cancer care or to types of diseases like that?
So here we're doing a couple of things. I mean, we have our whole industry has an enormous amount of computing power that is being made available at ever decreasing costs. There's an incredible deflation in the cost of enormous amounts of computing power. So if you think about disease states like cancer, and you're looking at a particular genomic sequence, being able to create a targeted therapy for a very, very specific type of cancer, as opposed to a broad brush, kind of carpet bombing type treatment. We've done a lot of work there. So TGen, the Translational Genomics Institute, we've created high performance computing power for them, addressing conditions like neuroblastoma, which is a deadly childhood cancer, and being able to, in a very, very short period of time, create a therapy for a very given, for a given patient that would have taken 10x or 100x the time, given the prior technique, and wouldn't have been as targeted. Now, if you think about the Moore's law and all the great advances that are happening in the molecular ingredients that go into computing, all of this is rapidly getting put into systems that are going to be available widespread. Another example would be medical imaging. We have about 8 billion medical images that we store for customers of all different types, MRIs, X-rays, CT scans. And we're certainly looking at how do we use that information and assist the physician seeing that information to say, hey, there's an 80% chance that this is probably one of these, or it's a 20% chance it's one of those. You ought to run this test or that test or ask this question. So how do you aid the physician with the enormous amount of data that's out there?
I was in Houston yesterday and Boston, I think the day before, and both cities say that the next wave of the digital revolution will be the merger of the life sciences, healthcare technology, with information technology, and that it'll help places like Houston, Austin, Boston, places with great medical centers, and almost migrated away from the engineering of, say, Silicon Valley. Do you see that as the next wave of the digital revolution?
I think it's certainly an enormous opportunity. The biological, sciences combined with the computational sciences. I don't think it's the only one, by the way. Right? If you think about computing power, its cost is just coming down at a tremendous rate, and so for a few pennies, you can put silicon in any number of devices, machines, gadgets, and physical objects. And so you go from having, let's say, 1 billion connected devices to 100 billion or 1 trillion. Now you're creating enormous amounts of data. That data can be used to create better outcomes, better results, improved productivity, efficiency. And again, you step back and you look at the world's unsolved problems, whether they be in energy, the environment, medicine. As we get more computational power, I think we go and address those problems at a faster rate. Mm-hmm. So it's a very exciting time.
Sometimes I think the shorthand for part of what you described is the Internet of Everything, right? Where, every
Sure.
device is sending data to places. What would, give me an example of what Dell could do to analyze that data or do something with it to be transformative or innovative?
Well, we see our customers embracing this at a pretty rapid rate. So you think about, one of our customers is Emerson. Mm-hmm. And Emerson has been in the business of, creating systems to control, manufacturing plants and refineries for a long, long time. Well, now what they're doing is they're putting little pieces of silicon across this entire network, and they're improving the productivity and efficiency of water treatment and everything else that goes on in that factory, getting higher yields, higher output. Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a lot of customers in retail. Well, a retail store is sort of an experiment in where do you put things, what color do you place them, where do you stack them on the shelves. How do you price them? Tons of data, actually. Right? And so retailers are actively working to figure out, okay, how do we use this very low cost availability of computing to make our stores more productive? In the education realm, we're working to effectively create data systems. So here in Texas, we have the Texas Student Data System. Our Family Foundation created a standard called EdFi, which is used in about 30 states to be able to measure educational outcomes. So the broad theme here, we call it the data economy, right? And if I think about where does the next $1 trillion of growth for our industry come from and for our customers, this unleashes all sorts of productivity and better outcomes across all sectors.
Yeah, you've mentioned two sectors, medicine and education, especially K through 12 education, that you would think would have been the most disrupted by the technology revolution and the data revolution, if you want to call it that, and they have been the least so. Why is, let's say, K through 12 education, what you do with your foundation and you do with your company, why are things, Ben Franklin invented a schoolroom for the academy in Philadelphia, and it was 24 desks in a row with a blackboard in front, and he'd say, yeah, if he walked into a classroom now, that's just what we had.
Yeah, well, things that have not changed very much don't change very quickly, right? So I experienced this as we created all sorts of innovations in supply chain. We had companies that would come to us and they say, we have been doing our supply chain the same way for 80 years, and we think we should change it, and we want to learn from you guys. We say, okay, let us explain, what we're doing, and we'll share. And they come back 10 years later and they ask the same question, and so it's really hard to change if you've been doing something the same way, for a long, long time. Education, particularly K through 12, is very much that way. Now, I think there are some encouraging things that are going on, the charter school movement, the availability of data. New York City public schools, Chicago, public schools have put in data systems where they can begin to say, hey, here are two classrooms in the same grade, teaching the same subject. Kids go in, they come out, but the results are dramatically different. Why is that?
Because of different teachers, which is why the teachers union might object to that.
Yeah, but ultimately, whether we like the data or we don't like the data, we should probably do something about it, right? and so, I think there is some real progress. We've also worked. Susan and I were at the foundation yesterday, and the team was telling us about a great project they did in South Africa, where we literally built a system to measure educational outcomes and data for the entire South African school system. Ultimately, it's in about 10% of the schools now, but we'll roll out to the whole country. This is where there was absolutely no data or information available, and now all of a sudden you've got world-class dashboards.
I'm glad that's in South Africa, but Arnie Duncan, the Secretary of Education, when I asked him what surprised him the most recently, he said, the fact that I can know every bit of data in every other industry, but it takes me a year to know the attendance at any particular school, which you should know the next day, that nationwide attendance record.
And a big part of the problem in measuring anything in a school is that it's measured differently from school to school. So even from district to district, school to school. And so part of EdFi is having a common way to measure so that, if we're comparing 100 schools and we're talking about attendance, we're all talking about the same thing, or else we're going to spend all our time, arguing about how we're not counting it the same way, and it's just a useless conversation. We learned all this stuff in running a business, right?
Right.
As you went around the world and you said, hey, how are you doing in selling this, providing that service? You've got to have a dashboard. You've got to have data, information to be able to inform decisions and create better outcomes.
But that's because you were running a business, and so was HP and Compaq or whatever, and you had to have all that data. Do you think the fact that our school systems are generally monopolies is one of the problems?
It's a big part of the problem. Sure, monopolies aren't very good at changing, and that's been a big part of the problem in education for sure.
You mentioned you and Susan were doing things at the foundation on this. We talked about it a bit, which is that the foundation does things in education and health. Dell, the company, does things in education and health. And you even have a adjunct to the foundation that's sort of a profit-making thing in education space, right? How do you juggle that? I mean, how do you make them all work together in a synergistic way?
Well, there are actually very specific rules about how they don't work together.
Oh, okay. I'm not from the SEC. I don't know these.
So we follow all those rules very carefully. But as it turns out, our foundation has been very focused on, youth outcomes, particularly youth in urban poverty. And certainly in the United States, that has had us focusing on education and, mostly, but with some healthcare. In India, we focused on education, healthcare, and also some affordable housing development, microfinance, helping to create a banking system for the unbanked. And in South Africa, education has been a huge focus.
Well, let me ask you a different way, which is what lessons have you learned in business that apply to philanthropy?
Well, we've certainly learned data matters, right? And it's okay to experiment and make mistakes. We've learned that many of the philanthropic or charitable organizations have great intent, but their ability to execute doesn't match up necessarily. So we've had a pretty active hands-on approach in terms of ensuring the success of our grants. And so it's a very returns-based approach to ensuring that we get results. We also have this philosophy of we like to find areas where we can make a discernible difference in a defined period of time and then have it continue on without us, right? And so leave and go do something else. So try to make some distinct change and then kind of move on to the next one.
Well, if you're data-driven, and I know you've supported certain of the charter schools that have sprung up, are you in favor of the core standards, the Common Core, that allows common sense of data, or do you think that sort of stifles innovation?
The foundation has not really taken a particular view on that. We've worked in schools that have that, worked in schools that don't have that. We're not really taking a big position on that.
When you talk about urban kids and kids from poor communities, the unequal opportunity that kids in our society have seems to be widening. I mean, one example is you went to the Houston public school system. Nowadays, if you're born to, in an affluent family, you tend not to go to an urban inner city public school system. What can be done not to shrink the income inequality or wealth inequality, but opportunity, to make opportunity for every kid in America more equal?
Yeah, I think it's certainly a big challenge. I think it's not just a question of America, right? It's a question of what's going on in the world economy, and what we're seeing is we need enormous amount skills and capability to be able to compete. And so a kid that doesn't have the 21st century skills in a developed country is going to have a very difficult time keeping up. And so that places, again, enormous priority on the education system. The education system has had a difficult time, keeping up with that requirement. Mm-hmm. I think this is a big challenge.
When you talk about the internet and third world, there are a billion people or so on the internet, right? What happens when the next billion come on? How is that transformative?
Well, if you include, mobile phones, you get the numbers go up to, maybe 4 or 5 billion, right?
Yeah.
So there are 1.8 billion PCs in the world, and if you, include, users who have mobile phones, you get up to, 5 billion plus. But, in places like Indonesia, India, Nigeria, Pakistan, huge numbers of users are coming on in very, very, very quickly. That's all generally a very, very good thing.
This will be my last question, then I'll open it up. You're now the United Nations Foundation's envoy for entrepreneurship, is that right? What do you see could best be done to encourage entrepreneurship? And I'll start by saying the United States and then the rest of the world.
Yeah, comparatively, the United States does pretty well at this. And my job with the United Nations is pretty simple. They've asked me to convince world leaders that job creation and entrepreneurship should be one of the Sustainable Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goal number 8, if any of you are voting on this, in September of 2015. And if you're involved in a business or you're an entrepreneur, this seems pretty obvious, right?
That's how jobs are created.
Yeah. You think about where did the next 500 million jobs come from? Where did the next billion jobs come from? Actually, the data is very clear that 70 to 90% of the new jobs come from entrepreneurs, small, medium-sized, growing businesses, pretty much all over the world. Now, if you want to achieve any of the Sustainable Development Goals, if you don't have jobs, it's a problem. Now, I've had an interesting observation as I've traveled around the world and set up operations in Morocco and Malaysia and India and all these places. The difference between, let's say, Morocco and Tunisia. When we set up 15 years ago, we were looking at, are we going to build in Morocco or Tunisia? It was pretty close. It was like 60-40 in favor of Morocco. And governments can play a role, right, in helping to create these businesses. And when you go to the real conflict zones that we have in the world today, if you change the government and you still have a lot of young unemployed people, you haven't solved the problem. And so, we really have to be thinking about how are we going to create jobs for all these young people. The only way to do that is more entrepreneurs. Governments can, on the margin, make it a little bit easier.
What did Morocco do that Tunisia didn't?
I think their education system was a little bit better. The incentives were a little bit better. It was a little bit safer, but it wasn't like dramatically so. But of course, in the 15 years, what happened in Tunisia and Morocco were pretty different. And we weren't the only guys who went to Morocco. A lot of companies went to Morocco and built operations there. And we all know what happened in Tunisia. I think we also, as a large, powerful country, we sometimes think, okay, we're going to go over there and drop some bombs. Okay, sometimes we do. We do that. That's part of what we do sometimes. Well, we should also think about how do we go create some jobs, because if you still have all these young people that are unemployed after there's a new government, after the bombs have been dropped, it's not going to end well. So we need more entrepreneurs. We need more growing businesses, and the UN on the margin can play a role in that, in getting governments to recognize that, and it does direct a lot of funding, in the right direction.
Well, amen. I will give a quick advertisement for the Aspen Institute, and I know Alex knows this, but we do a entrepreneur and investment and development in small businesses, both in Morocco and in Tunisia and the Palestinian territories, as part of this Middle East investment initiative, and Madeleine Albright runs it. So we'll hook up with some of the people from Dell, especially in Morocco, because we're trying to do that from the NGO sector, but as you say, it really works best from the business sector. Let me open it up. Clay, do you have your hands there? I don't know. There is a microphone, and Mr. Johnson is first speaker, questioner.
I remember reading about Google, and they require most of their employees, or they allow them to devote 20%, or they require them to devote 20% of their time to work on new ideas. And lo and behold, a whole lot of new ideas come out of there. In your company, is a big challenge how to drive increased creativity, increased customer service, more customers that you can serve as well as the ones you're serving now. So is it more of the customers that are being well served by you? Is it more creative service of the customers? What are your biggest challenges in that regard? More customers or creativity or some combination or something else?
It's both of those, but I think one of the challenges that big companies have as they grow is they don't want to take risks. And even if you get a bunch of people from a big company together, and they don't even like the word risk. It just doesn't come into the natural proclivity of people in large companies. And so I see part of my job is to reinsert risk into the company, which means you have to accept some failure. Now, if you're failing over and over again on the same thing, that's not risk. That's something else, right? So we consciously, take on projects, and it's think about it this way: if you have 10 projects, and 7 or 8 of them work out well, and a couple of them don't work out, that's okay. But you've got to be trying new things and experimenting. And this is something that as companies grow, they often forget to keep experimenting. The reason you got to be a large company is because you took on risks and you accepted failure. You weren't looking for a perfect solution, and so that's something we actively talk about inside the company. We have all kinds of contests and programs and even incentives to encourage that. And it's just this acceptance of the occasional failure.
Mm-hmm. And being publicly traded, does that make you more risk averse than being privately held?
I think so. I mean, certainly if you're so focused on particular results, we found that as a private company, we can be bolder. We can take on risks. I mean, the results may be more volatile, but that's the way things happen, right? There's no such thing as a straight trajectory of a business.
Mm-hmm. Here and there, and yes, there. Well, 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
So I was curious, sometimes there's a disconnect between universities and what they're able to teach, how advanced they are, and staying in with the needs of the skills, and like, for instance, big data. Are there enough people coming out of the universities providing that have the big data skills and going in the direction? How do you keep in touch with the universities that they're teaching the right thing that's needed 2 years, 5 years from now?
The whole area of data scientists and data analytics, there are not enough people that know how to do that, either coming out of universities or existing. What I would tell you is that, we spend a lot of time with, the number of great universities, including the University of Texas, working with, the faculty to kind of explain what sort of graduates do we need inside our business. But I would also tell you that, the kind of most advanced things that we're doing in our company, I think this is true in a number of companies, maybe they'll be taught in 5 years from now. And so, what students bring is they bring a foundational set of skills, and then they keep learning. And the learning never stops.
Yes, sir. And then,
So I have two questions. One for Michael Dell, and then I have one for you, Isaac. So Michael, being that we're a city here in Austin that's going to get Google Fiber, and you were talking earlier about how technology can help with schools and kids that are trying to basically better themselves. So things like Google Fiber, where previously you're going to go to work or go to a library and get internet access that's fast. Do you think Google Fiber would allow children, since they have access to that kind of technology, usually on their phone or by going to school, to have the kind of access at home and better themselves?
Yeah, no, look, bandwidth is fantastic. Fiber is pretty much the best you can get. If you can get fiber to the home, that's incredible. The speeds, the ability to access information is absolutely essential. We see people actually moving to places where they can get fiber, around the world. The U.S. has some challenges here because it's such a vast country and the population is pretty dispersed compared to, let's say, Japan or Korea, where you have a lot of dense population. But I think fiber to the home projects like Google Fiber are fantastic and can only help.
So for Isaac, I wanted to find out, you were mentioning things about transformative technology and things that are disruptive. So I wanted to find out, with that kind of technology like Dell's produced and others have produced, what do you think allows some people like Michael to succeed, where other people just languish, and they don't actually get their innovations to get out there and become successful?
well, I mean, if there were an easy answer, I wouldn't have had to write a 500-page book on this subject. And I do think people do it differently, which is why I always take a biographical narrative approach. I think a Bob Noyce, is one of the nicest guys in the world, is different than, say, a Steve Jobs, who nobody ever called the nicest guy in the world. So there are different ways of doing it, but I will say that one common thread that Michael mentioned, or that I asked him about, is they're always willing to think out of the box, think different, take risks, maybe even, not that any of you should, but maybe drop out when the time comes. And whether it's Einstein sort of questioning the first sentence in Newton's Principia, or Ben Franklin questioning the theory of lightning, or anything else, they tend to be rebels, and they tend to be willing to think out of the box, and that's very related to a willingness to take risks. I don't know if you'd agree there, but
Yeah, I agree. I think it's looking at problems from a different perspective and not being afraid to challenge the conventional
wisdom,
thinking. I knew Bob Noyce when he
Really?
lived in Austin.
you're not that old.
Well, I started really young.
You're
so,
born in 65, and so in 65.
I've always been young. It's just how I started.
Forever young,
Yeah.
as Joan Baez would,
So,
Bob Dylan would say.
Yeah, Susan and I knew Bob, and his wife, Ann, worked for us. She was in the kind of formative parts of our HR organization when they lived here.
Well, he was the nicest guy, wasn't he?
He was great, and what I found is people like Bob Noyce and Gordon and others
Gordon Moore.
they were very generous with their time, and they would explain stuff to you, and they were pretty patient guys.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, hi, I'm Mr. Isaacson and Mr. Dell. My name is Charmaine Sellers, and I'm going to ask a question different from technology. I'm focused on entrepreneurship. I own a construction company here in Austin, woman-owned, veteran-owned, and I'd like to get your feedback, Mr. Dell, when you mentioned about growing. I have a challenge in growing from small to medium. I want to be a large company, a national company. Did mentors help you in your growth spurts, or in your growth trajectory? And did they also assist you with innovative thoughts on how to grow your company?
Well, I'd say it sounds pretty corny, but I think the best mentors for us have been our customers. And we just learn the most from our customers. There have been plenty of other people that have helped us, whether they were advisors or board members when we had a board, right, when we were a public company, and others. But by far and away, I'd say we learned the most from listening to our customers and going to talk to them and finding out what they needed, and being able to build our business based on their needs. And we help the customer succeed, we succeed. Pretty simple.
I want to not discriminate against the way back. Was there any person? All right, way up there. I also want to give some exercise to these mic runners.
So, Mr. Dell, you mentioned that many NGOs and nonprofits have great intentions, but don't always deliver the best results. I know that over the past century, hundreds of billions, or tens of billions of dollars at least, have been poured into Africa with very few results. And you mentioned that you make an effort to be data-driven and result-driven in your philanthropy. So would you elaborate upon the biggest issues that philanthropy has faced, and also the ways in which you encourage being data and result-driven?
Well, we should have Susan or Janet Mountain, who runs our foundation, come talk about that. I'll tell you, I spend a couple of hours a quarter on our foundation, and it's what they do all the time. We are incredibly data-driven. We've had a lot of success here in the United States with that approach. We've had a lot of success in India. In Africa, we've ended up finding different kinds of problems. So, for example, we have a scholarship program where we, help kids, get through a 4-year degree program. And what we found there is that many of the kids didn't have the basic necessities just to be able to show up for school. And they had all kinds of, issues at home that impeded their ability to stay focused on school. And so we've done all sorts of interventions to help with that. We've also, had to kind of keep tailoring and tweaking the programs. It's not, it's not an exact. It's certainly not the same formula each place we go, and we have to constantly be learning and tweaking. We're at the beginning of our efforts, relatively speaking, in Africa. India, we're a lot further along, and in the U.S., we've been doing that for the longest.
All right, back there, and yeah, if you would, stand up and shout if you want, and I'll try to get further back too, sorry. You're engendering a lot of questions. I'm not used to this. I guess it's University of
Question
Texas.
for both of you. What specific advice do you have for young people who are interested in starting their own business?
Well, Michael is the person who knows how to answer it more than I've never started my own, so I'll let him handle it.
Experiment, don't be afraid to fail, don't look for the perfect plan, just get started. You'll know 10 times more in 6 months after you've started than you will sitting around doing nothing, just planning. So just start.
Great. Yeah, right here. And then, yeah.
I'm interested in the effects of technology on globalization, particularly two changes that should be really take hold in the next 25 years. 3D printing and automation. What is 3D printing going to do to manufacturing? Will China still be the giant?
The question is about 3D printing and what that will do to manufacturing. Michael?
3D printing or additive manufacturing, what does it do to manufacturing? I don't think anybody really knows for sure. Today, the kinds of things that you make with 3D printers are interesting, but they're not really high precision parts. There's really interesting things going on in biology with printing of cells. People are printing houses with 3D printers. They're big ones, not the prettiest houses, but okay. It's happening. Look it up on YouTube. You can find it.
Cool.
I think it has a lot of promise, but where it goes in 5, 10, 20 years, very hard to know. I mean, if you think about innovation in our industry, or broadly speaking, the ability to combine together things into unexpected outcomes and disruptions in businesses, that happens all the time, extremely hard to predict, right? So if you were a hotel company, could you have predicted Uber, or Airbnb? If you were a taxi company or a car company, could you have predicted Uber? Or if you were, a retailer, maybe you could have predicted Amazon, but could you have predicted eBay, right? So, very difficult to anticipate all these combinatorial inventions. Mm-hmm. There are lots of experiments. Not all of them work. 3D printing seems like a tremendous technology. What I see at the end of almost all of these 3D printers, they're controlled by computers, right? They require enormous amounts of data. There's files going over the networks. They have to be stored and protected. Manufacturing can certainly be changed, but if you look at the kind of high precision, machine tooled parts, maybe a while before your 3D printer does that.
What about robotics?
Let me go to the way back there. If you don't mind, there's so many people have questions. So, yeah. Although you could quickly answer robotics while the microphone is being moved.
What does it do to the economy? People are going to be unemployed. You're going to have massive deflation.
Well, all technology both creates and destroys jobs, from the wheel on forward. So, when the wheel came out, a lot of people lost their job. Mm-hmm. But a lot of new jobs were created too, right? So any new technology will both create and destroy jobs. Maybe it's time to learn how to make wheels, right? So, better learn how to program robots. I think the displacement and disruption in the economy is certainly increasing because the rate of change. So the rate at which you need to acquire new skills, that's a real challenge. And so you've got to keep learning and keep applying new skills. But I don't think it's humans versus the machines. I think it's humans plus the machines.
I'm going to do a quick thing about, just mention something in my book, because it starts with Lord Byron, who was a Luddite. And I mean that literally, because his only speech in the House of Lords was defending the followers of Ned Ludd, who was smashing the robotic and automated looms in the 1830s in England, thinking it would put people out of jobs. His daughter, Ada Lovelace, loved the way those looms work and figured out how punch cards could be used to create machines that could do general purpose anything. They were wrong then when they thought technology would generally put people out of work, and I think they're totally wrong now. There are no data points in 2,000 years of technology actually reducing the number of jobs in an economy. It just changes the nature of the jobs, as Michael said. Yes, in the way back.
Yes, this is a question for Michael Dell.
Yeah.
In your comments tonight, you've explained a lot of the advantages of going private to have a longer horizon in investing in new businesses, et cetera. But when you went private, you took on a new partner, substituting basically the public for at least one private equity firm. I think it's Silver Lake. So those guys may not have a 90-day time horizon, but they have investors. They want to make money on their investment in the privatized Dell. What kind of dialogue and back and forth did you have at the beginning as to the trade-offs between what you want to do, what they want to do, and how's it panned out thus far, like a year into it?
Yeah, it's worked out great. I think they see the opportunity to invest in and take on the risk and grow the business, and they have a much longer term time horizon. So they're very happy investors, as am I. They're minority investors, which makes things a little easier. But it's going very well. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, back there. We're going to do a couple of more. We'll end in about 8:15 or so, in case you're planning your Uber apps.
Hi, Mr.
Uber,
Dell.
Lyft, whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
I was going to ask about the incoming innovation district that's being planned along with the Dell Medical Center here at UT, and to know if your foundation or your company foresees any further involvement in that innovation district, or what you envision for that area.
Well, I think there's a very exciting development going on in Austin around the biotech sector, the whole healthcare sector, the medical sector, that will spin off as a result of all the great things that are going on here on campus. And we're super supportive of that. We're not a biotech company, but we do provide a lot of technology to company. All of these biosciences are consuming enormous amounts of computing power. And if you think about Life Technologies, a company bought by Thermo Fisher, that makes these huge genome sequencers. In every single one of those, there's a bunch of Dell computers, right? And so they're a great customer. And of course, all of this data, has to be stored, protected, turned into real insights. And as the cost of doing that comes down, becomes available to more people, creating better healthcare outcomes. We're very excited about how medicine is becoming a lot more data-driven and more analytic.
Mm-hmm. Right in the middle, the last question you have, so make it good. And
thanks for being here tonight, Mr. Isaacson, Mr. Dell. This question for Mr. Dell. What goal would you like to see Dell achieve most in the next 5 years?
Great final question.
Well, look, we have been able to serve, tens of millions of customers around the world. We're adding customers at a pretty rapid rate. And certainly a big priority for us is building our solutions capability. So we started out as a product company, and products are still very important to us. But a big part of our growth has been in software and services and being able to solve larger problems for customers. So in the last 5 years, we roughly doubled the size of that business. The next 5 years, we'd like to double it again. There are roughly 10 companies on the planet that have more than 1% of the $3 trillion IT market. We have about 2%, so we're one of the 10. We'd like to have 3% or 4% in the future years. That might take us more than 5 years, but hey, we're young, we're strong, we're just getting started. We're the world's largest startup. We're having fun. So, thanks very much.
You did say of Bob Noyce and Gordon Moore that they were very generous with their time and sharing their wisdom. That's one more thing you share with them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Really good. That was really, really